our problems are one, like poor political governance in our countries, right? Like people just are like really poor, and like in a lot of the Muslim communities abroad are suffering from a lack of care on the part of their government, right? They're just not, the people are poor, right? Ultimately speaking, people are just very, very poor, right? And that's a big issue. And then the other thing also is that there aren't many economic opportunities for people. There isn't a lot of like financial opportunities for people. So people just, like Egypt, for example, has rampant unemployment, right? Like I just think of certain places, like Egypt's a big like Muslim population country, right? Rampant unemployment in Egypt, right? So, you could say that like the issue in a place like Egypt is Islam, maybe, like you could say that, or you could say actually no, the issue is like governance and the fact that like people are poor, and if people just weren't poor and they had like better governance structures, maybe they'd be doing a little bit better, and maybe like the Ummah would be doing slightly better. I don't know if I think that the Muslim Ummah is like divided. That's the thing that like I don't find that the Muslims are divided.
Really?
I don't find that the Muslims are divided. And
If
I
that
think it goes
wasn't
back to like what we were
if
talking
this
about
is
earlier.
if this is what we're like united, then that's an even bigger issue.
But what's a dividing thing? What do you think for you is like like an example of division in the Muslim Ummah?
An ex- One that stands out the most is one sector of Muslims, which I would say is about 30 to 40%, are praying 5 times a day, do everything correct, go by the book. And the other sector is, delving into weed, alcohol, smoking, sex, drugs, all the other things. And there's just a huge disconnect in understanding each other. One thinks that the others are too extreme, and the other one thinks that these are just, people going off the haywire, don't understand Islam and all this kind of
So
stuff.
what you brought up is I agree with you on that. Right? I agree with you on that. And but I don't know if I would classify it, like I'm glad that I know that's what you mean, right? I don't know if I'd classify that as being division, but that's one form of division, right? I don't know if like those divisions there are because of the scholars and fiqh, right? Like I think those divisions are
No,
because
it's not because
they,
of the scholars.
yeah.
It's just because of us.
Yeah, it's because of us, right? And I don't know if I think those kind of like issues, especially for the people that are kind of, let's say for example, straying, right? Like I think for a lot of those people, it's because like some people, they just don't have any respect for Islamic scholarship. Like some people fundamentally think that like Muslim scholars are idiots, right? That they're just kind of like some dude in the middle of like Egypt who, or Morocco, right? Or I don't know, like any place,
Middle
right?
of the
Like
desert.
in the middle of the desert, right?
Yeah.
Some person that's like in Mauritania or whatever that like doesn't know anything, and that's all they just kind of like talk about Islam, and they have no real like substantive knowledge without knowing that like actually this guy can quote you Aristotle. Some dude that's out in the desert in Mauritania can quote you Aristotle better than you can, who's gone through like a logic curriculum better than you can, who understands rhetoric, which you don't even study anymore because it's no longer part of the curriculum in America, but like understands rhetoric, understands how language is used to like to persuade people, understands the linguistics, and understands like terms can have multiple different meanings, right? Like this person is brilliant. This guy that's in the desert is brilliant. Like he lives in the desert, he spends his entire time just learning. Like the way that people did historically, they just learned. Even in Europe, that's what they did. They found teachers and they just learned their entire lives. That's what he's doing. And this stuff would happen like in convents or like in churches where people would like spend time with priests, and that's where they were learning. They remove themselves from the rest of the world and they just learn. They spend their time learning. They're able to produce the masterpieces that like we think of as like the great pieces of Western philosophy or literature, right? That's what's happening in these places. Some people think these people are idiots. They think like the scholar's like an idiot. He doesn't really know. Don't realize that he's like millions of times smarter than you are and knows things a lot more than you do. But doesn't live in your context. Doesn't use your phone and stuff, right? Most of the time they do use their phone, but like just doesn't have that kind of like techie knowledge that we have. That's one group, and I think the other group are people that, dude, like, is it fun following Islam? Maybe not. If I know like my friends are partying, right? My friends are smoking weed, they're drinking, sleeping around and stuff like that. Like just kind of like you're giving into your base desires. It's a lot of fun, right? Why would I choose to be like, yeah, you know what, man, I'm not gonna smoke weed. I'm not gonna like. Why would I do that? Like, why would I fundamentally do that if the rest of society is telling me, yeah, man, have fun, like have fun. We just have really really poor values in our society, and I think the thing is like, it's more about like rectifying the society itself, rectifying the values that we have as a society, and then also rectifying our understanding of like what Islam provides for a person that you can feel actually content. There's a lot of people who are going in like who have drug addiction, don't realize that, you know what, like you can party all you want, drink a lot when you're 17 years old as a Muslim because you're going to parties and stuff. By the time you're 25, you can't kick the alcohol habit. Now you're just, alcohol is your thing. In fact, you can't even walk into a room without feeling anxious, without like having a drink. And I think that's why people go to bars and stuff, to like meet people. It's like you need to get drunk in order for you to engage in the activities that you do, because nobody fundamentally would be like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm sober and everything, I'm gonna go to a place, I'm gonna pick up somebody, I'm gonna go like and sleep with them at night. And think about all the stuff that kind of goes into this. We have like we talk about like rape culture in America, like it's also tied into like alcohol, right? You get rid of like these issues, you get rid of like alcohol, right? You deal a little bit with the rape issue, right? It's not just because of alcohol, it's a bunch of other issues as well, like control and stuff. But it helps solve some domestic violence, abuses and stuff like that. The Muslims that are kind of participating in this stuff don't realize that the stuff I'm engaging with, like alcohol, right, and drugs, are the cause of strife for a lot of people. There are people that are peddling drugs on the street because they just don't have money, and that's all they can do. And the drugs that they just sold you are the only way they can make an income. If they didn't have to sell drugs, they just wouldn't sell drugs to you. So you're actually kind of like perpetuating like just a really, really bad environment. And I don't know, like for me, it's like if I ever took a drink of alcohol, the first thing I think about is like some guy somewhere in the world is drinking alcohol right now and beating his wife. Do I want to partake in that? I don't want to partake in that. And like in a large part of it, maybe just because he's like, he can't control himself, or a large part of it, he has anger problems, or he just has control problems and he's beating his wife, and he does it when he's drunk, and when he's not drunk, he doesn't do it. And the difference here is alcohol.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, just to wrap up on something, is that, even God told, or at least the Prophet, peace be upon him, told us that Muslims will be weak once what's in their heart is weak. And so at the end of the day, I think that's what it really is that in our hearts we're weak, and that usually wraps within our minds. Like we're very ignorant about our own religion, we're very ignorant about our own principles. And so I think that's really what's the root of the problem, the root as to why we drink, why we smoke, why we do everything that we do.
People look at the state of Western society and where we're at. We're kind of like on the brink of collapse, right? Inshallah we're not, because that would mean like a lot of people would suffer, right? But we're on like the brink of collapse. Like people don't realize how fragile like Western society is right now. And there are people that are like, oh yeah, you know what, like as a Muslim, I'm not like comfortable in the fact that like I have my own Muslim identity, and there's certain practices that are like Christian practices, or perhaps like capitalistic practices that are inherited from Christian like Western practices, right? That I need to go and do that stuff, right? Like I'm so uncomfortable with myself that I need to go do that. It's the same thing that people in the Black community talk about when it comes to like changing your hairstyle, right? Like we're putting products in your hair, right? Like the types of things that do you really kind of need to do these things, and why are you doing it? If it's just kind of like for beauty purposes, okay, fine, right? But if it's because you fundamentally dislike something about yourself, then that's a bigger problem. And I think there's a lot of Muslims who fundamentally have a problem with Islam, just like they dislike Islam. And they don't want to say it. They like the ethnic part of Islam. They like, yeah, I'm a Muslim and I'm a minority, and like, I need to fight for Islam as a minority.
But they have this internalized.
But internally, it's like an internal hatred towards themselves. And when they talk about Islam, they talk about Islam like, oh yeah, like we have a lot of problems as Muslims, and like, we can't get our act together, and like all the problems in the world are because of Islam, and like and I just think like, dude, it's so
and Muslims
sad.
are, Muslim men are abusive, and they all this kind of stuff that just.
And the stuff of like saving Muslim women. Like who came up with that? It's like it's colonial, like the colonialists, right? Like they came up with the imperialists. They came up with this notion that we're gonna save Muslim women. I don't know if you've seen this like video of like things like Bariba, like and others, like these North African leaders, right, or presidents and prime ministers, who are like literally going around like unveiling Muslim women in like the 60s or whatever, right? Like they're literally going to villages and stuff and like just unveiling women because the French told them that like, oh yeah, you gotta unveil your women, right? Like, and then like look at French society. Like who wants to be like part of French society? It's like just ridiculous, right? Like, but for some reason like Muslims internalize this stuff, You know, it's really fascinating. This is the last thing I'll say. I keep ranting, but you know what? I think it's Colonel Hastings, right? When William Hastings was when the British were in India, right? This I think was like 1795 or something like that. It was like a long time ago. But Hastings and his like crew, right? These Orientalists at that time were attempting to find a way to create Anglo-Mohammedan law. They were trying to find a way to like create Islamic law that kind of fits in with Western liberal like English values, right? And one of the things that they came across was this whole thing of like blood writ, right? If let's say God forbid you killed somebody in my family, I don't need to like execute you. You don't need to be executed. I could say like, okay, fine, I understand. Like, you know, give me a certain amount of money or whatever, and we'll call it like a day, right? This is something that existed also in Western societies. They engaged in that. They also engaged in the possibility that I could like forgive you. There's a bunch of stuff that like, you know, can happen, right? They looked at Islamic law and they said Islamic law is too merciful. They said this law is too merciful. It lets people off the hook too much, right? Now, like 200 or 300 years later, what are they saying? Islamic law is too like backwards and draconian. It's harsh, right? Just 200, 300 years ago, they were saying like Islamic law is too merciful. What do we need to do? We need to make it so that it's a little harsher. Then 200, 300 years comes by and they're like, oh no, now it's too draconian. We need to make it softer. You're going to keep playing this game with people that just aren't like convinced in terms of their own legal system, right? They're not convinced. They don't have a 1400-year legal system like we do, a legal tradition that's coherent, right? That gives us an understanding of like what is acceptable and what's not acceptable as they keep changing, right? Like as the United States comes and says, okay, well now like, you know, certain practices are acceptable. Or like we get into a future where it's like the Handmaid's Tale. In the future, maybe we're like living in like a Handmaid's Tale future. Now they're going to go to Muslim society and say, oh, you know, you need to control your women more. Like, we're just going to keep playing this game until a lot of Muslims realize that you have a set of values, and you have a set of values as a Muslim in the West. Like, you have cultural values as a Muslim Westerner. If they don't contradict each other, just take both. Take the good from both and just kind of go with it.